Good Friday morning, or afternoon or evening, as it were. And I have a time limit now, and had technical difficulties, so we'll see how this goes. Twitter is dropping the Periscope video service technically, which they announced a long time ago, and they claim that they're dropping their Periscope API, which I use for streaming to Twitter. There is a new API, but it is not working. So I just tried it. Nothing showed up in my Twitter feed, so some weekend testing will be in order for that. So with that, let's get on to some Friday flaneuring, I think is how you say it. I don't know. Flaneur. A French noun referring to a person literally meaning stroller, lounger, saunterer, or loafer, but with some nuanced additional meanings. And I am all about nuance, as you probably know. So this is just a roundup of stuff on Friday. So let's jump into that. So first of all, wow, this is kind of a bare slide, but thank you to those who find my ramblings of value on YouTube. I was informed that I passed 1,000 subscribers recently. I don't actually pay attention to it really, and I have to go check it to find out. So it's like, okay, if you find it valuable, great, subscribe. If you don't, well, that's cool too. I get it. So thank you to those who find it valuable, I guess. Hopefully I continue to produce something meaningful. And I may have to put this off, but I've mentioned this has been sitting in the box since I got it. I don't even remember when it was delivered. But thank you. I received another Microsoft MVP award, and I was going to open this box and show you what's in it, but given my time constraint, I will defer that to some other time when I can ramble and show you what's in the secret box. I'm sure you already know, but anyway, so thank you for that. Another year. And thanks to all who helped make the DynamicsCon virtual conference a success. Another fantastic conference by the organizers of DynamicsCon. I only play a small part by helping on the organizing committee. And thanks to all the presenters, tons of presenters over several days, lots of content. And this is about the new DynamicsCon Live in-person conference coming up in Anaheim, California, right in my backyard and right next to Disneyland. It is Thursday, November 11th. The website says November 10th and 11th, but on November 10th, that is a Wednesday, that is more of a registration and a cocktail event, whatever you call that, reception. There we go. It's a reception. And I'm told there is a rooftop bar on top of the JW Marriott Anaheim. So that sounds pretty cool, like pretty fancy. So there will be a Business Central track, a whatever they're calling F&O these days, finance, I don't know. And then CE, whatever they're calling that product nowadays, sales, support, CRM. So 3 tracks. And I believe we have proposed sessions for all those tracks. You can go to live.dynamicscon.com/agenda to check out those sessions. And we had to put those together relatively quickly. And it is actually quite challenging to plan a one-day conference. How do you capture Business Central in one day? I think we only had 6 or 8 sessions to do that. So we quickly pulled together a group of people to help and figured out, okay, how much content do we cover? Do we have a technical, functional focus? And how do we balance all of this stuff without knowing necessarily who's going to be coming? So very interesting challenge, but we came up with what we think is a good session schedule. And here's a brief glimpse. You can check it out, more info on the website, but we have 2 panels, which is open to all the speakers to answer questions and share thoughts. Being a BC consultant and implementation best practices, configuration packages, reporting, sales, Microsoft 365 integrations, workflow, and app or extension and development discussion. So jam-packed content with the best speakers in the whole world, of course. So please register if you can make it out to Anaheim on November 10th and 11th. Come and visit. Let's hang out. I will be there, and yeah, it'll be a good time. So something I learned about Business Central relative to a Dynamics GP feature. And thank you to Jeremy Viska for helping me research this. I was asked a question by a partner who has formerly worked with GP and is now starting to implement BC. Is it possible to modify Business Central to replicate a feature that Dynamics GP has? So and I apologize, I have a cold. I have had a cold for several days here, and it's very annoying. So still fighting it. In Dynamics GP here, this is called the Build Payment Batch window, and formerly we refer to it as Select Checks. It's basically saying, look at all my vendors, all my open AP invoices, and tell me, based on the rules and criteria and payment terms and discounts and all this stuff, go and look and tell me what I should pay this week during this check run or EFT run, payment run. And one of the options at the bottom is to automatically apply existing unapplied payments, credit memos, and returns. So if a vendor gave me a credit memo and I entered that into the accounts payable in Dynamics GP, if that credit memo is sitting out there, go ahead and apply it as part of this payment run. So if I have a $1,000 invoice, $100 credit, apply that $100 credit so that I only pay this vendor $900. And just as important, make sure to include that credit memo showing that I'm using that on the remittance. So on the payment remittance advice sent to that vendor, make sure to show and explain why I'm only paying $900 for that $1,000 invoice so it's clear what's going on. That's just as important as using that credit memo, right? And also right below the red box there, you see an additional check mark that I forgot to highlight. Print previously applied documents. So if someone went in and manually applied that $100 credit memo to the $1,000 invoice and said, okay, this is how we want to use that credit memo, also include that so that you let the vendor know on the remittance advice that that's how that credit memo is used and why we're only paying them $900. This is really important so that vendors don't get confused and complain and think they're not being paid, right? So this is a standard feature that almost everyone in the GP world on the AP side knows about. So the vendor says, yeah, the customer's saying, well, I need a customization so that I can do this in Business Central. And the partner's like, how do we do this? What's the best way? And I said, well, that's a good question. So I got on a call with Jeremy Viska, who, if you don't know, he is a longtime Nav and Business Central expert and doing all sorts of consulting work with partners and customers and customization. So he's a very busy man, but he was kind enough to have a call with me, and he showed me some very interesting things. And I learned a lot, and I think he actually learned about something in Business Central because he just hadn't tested this particular permutation, which, as far as we know, my colleague and I, Tanya Henderson, looked into this. As far as we know, this is not really explicitly documented in Business Central. So one feature that Tanya was aware of was this option in vendors. So if you go into a vendor under payments, there's an application method apply to oldest. And I believe she looked into this, but it's just not well explained or documented. And as Jeremy tested this and we saw, if you post a credit memo to a vendor based on what we saw, this option will automatically apply that credit memo to the oldest open invoice. And as far as I know, this is not a feature that's available in Dynamics GP. In GP, you enter a credit memo, you post it, it sits out on the vendor account unapplied. It remains unapplied. And as far as I know, there is no feature in Dynamics GP to automatically apply that. You can apply it during entry, you can apply it after posting, but it is a manual step to apply it. Or you could have the select checks build payment batch process apply it as part of that, but it's an additional step. But it seems that this application method apply to oldest in Business Central under the vendor card allows those credit memos to be applied automatically. I think this is a great idea. I work with over 175 customers who use a solution that I developed in GP, whose sole job of my application is to apply payments and credit memos as an additional process. Because it is not something that can be done via API or automatically, it's a hassle for customers to deal with. So this, for customers where this would work in their process, just, hey, apply to oldest. Vendor, deal with it. This is how we're doing our applications. Awesome feature. Enter the credit memo, apply it, boom. Enter the credit memo and post it, boom. It gets applied to the oldest invoice. You're done. I can't tell you how many GP customers I have that have dozens, if not hundreds, of credit memos unapplied throughout their system, and they dread having to deal with this. It's a nightmare. I'm dealing with a customer right now. They're like, you've got to be kidding me. We do not have time to apply hundreds of credit memos across hundreds of vendors when this is a meaningless operation for us. Like, we don't care. Just get it done. And so we're having to come up with custom solutions to do that in GP. It's just not a valuable process. So I'm going to look into those further. This is an awesome feature as far as I could tell. Like, no one cares in general. Apply the credit memo. Just get it. Like, I don't want to think about it. Very cool. Also, Jeremy showed me there is an AP unapply process in Business Central. Awesome feature. Due to a historical weird quirk, whatever, I can come up with potential reasons why this exists. In Dynamics GP, there is no unapply of AP payments or credit memos in Dynamics GP. And I can theorize why that is, understanding some of the mechanics, but it's kind of messy, right? So if you apply a credit memo to an invoice in Dynamics GP, I believe you cannot unapply. You have to void the transaction and then reissue it, then reapply to the proper location or vendor or whatever. So anyway, a second cool feature in Business Central that I learned about thanks to Jeremy. Very, very neat. But there's more. In Business Central, it appears very similar to the build payment batch or select checks process in Dynamics GP. Business Central has the suggest vendor payments. As far as I could tell, it's effectively functionally equivalent to build payment batch in GP. It's saying, hey, Business Central, go out, scan my vendors, scan my AP invoices, tell me what I should be paying based off of payment terms, discounts, criteria, etc. There's some slight differences because the systems are different, but essentially does the same thing. And if you click on the show more under options, some additional valuable options show up. So that is very cool. And what I think both Jeremy and I learned in this test, just because we'd never done it before, he never looked or answered this question before, is Business Central will, as far as we could tell based on our test, automatically apply unapplied credit memos. So if you do not have that apply to oldest option specified for your vendors, Business Central will say, no worries, I will take care of this. This appears to be automatic as far as I can tell based on our limited test. I don't know if there's a way to turn this off or prevent this in the presumably rare case where you don't want this to occur. I guess you could just remove this from the suggested vendor payments, but this is automatic, very similar or is equivalent to Dynamics GP. Fantastic. So I'm going to get back to that partner, and there are some complicating factors of this particular customer that he's dealing with, some third-party products. So I will let him know, hey, kind of good news, I think. Business Central behaves exactly the same as Dynamics GP, and it will pick up those unapplied credit memos and automatically apply them. I will also say, hey, by the way, you may want to look at this feature to apply to oldest for the vendor and set that if that works for your customer, just like get rid of it. With the caveat being, if the credit memo is automatically applied to oldest, we want to make sure that that application shows up on the payment remittance for the vendor. Like I said, that is just as important to communicate that to a vendor as it is to actually apply it and take that credit. So I need to look into that to see if I do a check run in the US, obviously, that applied credit memo, previously applied credit memo during posting shows up on the remittance. So there I want to see it, and here I want to see it. And I don't recall if we saw this on the remittance. I don't know if we checked the remittance advice for this test during the suggest vendor payment. So with that, very cool AP features. I've spent a lot of time in AP, more time in accounts payable in the last 14 years in GP than in any other module. So I'm most familiar with that. I developed a solution for automating this process in GP. So it's kind of near and dear to me. So check that out. Very interesting stuff. And lastly, one very interesting feature that Jeremy found is in the suggest vendor payments, you can filter by dimensions. So very interesting concept for a few reasons. One is if you're using dimension codes to say division or entity, if you're using something like even binary streams multi-entity management, how can you use the the dimension filters on suggest vendor payments to control your payables? So that's another dimension of no pun intended, of how you might be able to use suggest vendor payments. So I'm going to explore that. Very interesting feature there. Okay, next topic on the flaneuring journey. So I am digging into OAuth for the 17th time that I've tried to learn OAuth. It's just because I start on it, get distracted, get interrupted, have to work on something else, go back to it, have to start all over again. And I attended, or I wasn't able to attend because I was on vacation, but I am watching the videos of AJ Kaufman's OAuth class or online course that he provided. So if you want to learn more about OAuth, AJ Kaufman is like the Jedi master of this stuff. So as part of this learning, the reason I'm learning is because I'm trying to think about OAuth design. And you may not think of this as a thing, but I'm learning you really do need to design your OAuth interaction. So for example, if I want to have an Azure function call my Business Central API, what type of OAuth am I going to use? It is not just OAuth. It's not a monolithic thing. There are different types of OAuth flows that you can use. And so, for example, am I going to use the auth code grant flow, the client credential flow, the device code flow, resource owner flow? And so it's like, whoa, what does this mean? And that's kind of my eyes glazed over when I first went through the videos of his course. Now that I'm playing with it a little more, it's starting to gel. In concept, I get all this. It's like, yep, I get it. This is how it works. I totally get it. But when you throw these words out and you have to figure out how to configure it and use it, it's like, what is this? It's a little overwhelming. My brain just can't comprehend it by reading. I have to do it 10 times to kind of understand the mechanics. So the questions I'm currently asking is, I want to have an Azure function call Business Central. You're like, anyone who's done this, it's easy. You just do this. Well, do you? Because there's context to this. What if I want to deploy this as a solution with a customer? I don't want a 35-step process to set up the Azure function and set up OAuth and have the user manually authenticate with Business Central. And it's a lot of steps for the overall process. How do I make it as easy as possible? And so I thought, well, I want the client credential flow, the service to service flow, right? Like you just paste in your client secret, store that in an Azure secret or something like that. Well, as I learned, not necessarily, because when you use client credential flow for certain OAuth applications, I guess, you need to provide or grant admin consent. Sometimes client credential flows cannot run under the context of a specific user. O365 graph, I'm thinking of you. So later on, I'm thinking, well, I want to use Azure function to call Office 365. I want Business Central to call Office 365 via the Graph API. And if you're familiar with this, this kind of may make sense. If you've never done this, this may be kind of like gibberish. But I said, well, if I'm calling Office 365 Graph, I want it to interact as this Office 365 user. I want it to talk to this mailbox, this calendar. You cannot do that with a client credential flow. Like, come on, man. It has to be granted admin consent, and then it has full reign of your entire tenant. I don't want that. So although it is easier in some respects, it gets keys to the kingdom with the client credential flow. So it's like, oh, come on. So I'm having to start over. It's like, okay, now I need to not just learn OAuth, I need to learn OAuth design. So I have questions for the Jedi AJ Kaufman to say, okay, I'm starting to learn this, and how do you go about choosing a flow given these constraints and reducing the manual steps for deployment, right? I don't want to make customers do 50 steps to deploy my solution. So I need to figure this out. It's not as easy. So videos coming in the future as I figure this stuff out. So with that. So Eric Hogard had a good video recently that called Don't Just Tell Me What's Wrong, Help Me Instead. So I recommend checking that out. Any developer, if you've done any development or any product support, you will empathize with this. And while I do fully support the goal, unfortunately, in my experience, I just have failed. No matter how simple I try to make a dialogue, a log message, an error, like 95+% of customers, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what that dialogue or error message says. I will still get a support call. I have an error message that says, this vendor does not exist in your system as part of importing data. I will get a phone call. I don't know. So while I support the goal of simplifying the dialog boxes, the error messages, and providing helpful information, in my jaded worldview, it's of limited help, unfortunately. And and here's the context. I support over 675 customers myself. 500 of those customers I support with a colleague, just the two of us, part-time. So our goal is to have less than 4 hours a day of support for these customers, preferably less than 2 hours a day. And we've been very successful with that. So 500 customers we support less than 2 hours a day. And it is, dialogues are one part of that, but we have found that we have refactored a dialogue multiple times. It is ignored well over 95% of the time, and we still get the support call. So of the 675 customers that I support, my goal is to dramatically reduce the cost of sales, implementation, and support so that it's sustainable for me and that it is not a full-time job, because surprisingly, it's not really enough revenue for a full-time for both of us. So what we are doing is we have worked very hard to reduce the cost of pre-sales, simplify our messaging. When we get a prospect or an inquiry, we have standard email templates that go out of the CRM system, and we have simplified that messaging year after year after year. How do we reduce the number of words in that email that goes out to communicate everything the customer wants to know based on our 14 or 10 years of experience selling these products? Then we have redesigned our pricing multiple times to simplify it down to one price. We have additional items on the menu, but all of our messaging points to one price. What does your product cost? One price. And they can have questions from there, but for 90+% of our customers, that answers their question. So we dramatically reduce the cost of pre-sales and sales and messaging, CRM, and pricing. We have added automatic configuration to the software. So we used to have some manual configuration steps. To the extent possible, we've automated many of these. So things that are traditionally done via manual processes in the Dynamics GP world where we're selling these products, we have realized that X number of support cases we get are due to this process. Okay, we worked together. We eliminated the process entirely, fully automated. No one else that we know of does that. So we've reduced tons of support calls due to that. Automatic error handling. We've added features to detect the problem and automatically restart the software. So if this unrecoverable problem occurs, restart. Like it actually restarts the software itself. And that's my colleague's genius work, because he is a much better developer than I. Other things, we detect the problem, back off, and try again. So it's multiple retries in the software. So it's not just, hey, an error occurred, I'm giving up, you need to intervene. It's fully automated diagnostics, restart, and just fault tolerance within the software. We've added extensive diagnostics. So what are the 10 questions we have when a customer has a support ticket? And we have diagnostics to tell us that, either in the error email they get as the customer administrator or in a diagnostic report that the customer can send to us. Now that's how we deal with it in the GP world on-prem. But in the BC world, we're going to have application insights telemetry, which it's amazing. If you've ever looked at application insights, like it is incredible. If you haven't, you absolutely need to enable it with all your BC tenants. And if you're doing app source development, absolutely do incorporate app insights telemetry key in your application. Essential. It is absolutely amazing coming from the on-prem world where every customer was this mysterious black box and you didn't know what was going on, what errors were occurring, and how much they were using your software. It's all just visible to you through App Insights. So amazing. But we've had to do that ourselves with diagnostics. And then rapid updates and releases. So we work together to say, hey, we're having this problem. great. Fix it in software, modify the software, refactor the software, change something to essentially eliminate those support cases. And then we can push out a new release usually within a week. So we've been very successful with that. So the dialogues are one very, very small component of that. And unfortunately, I found that it's been of limited help in the context of the overall sales and support costs for software for our, collectively, my colleague and I, over 750 customers. So, lots of components that can go into that. Eric's video just got me thinking about how have I done that in the past, and can I reproduce those successes, if you will, in Business Central App Source world? And I think that's possible, and I'm working very hard to reproduce the good practices I've had in the past in the context of BC App Source. So many things going on in my little brain. And to wrap up, this Saturday, Saurav Dhyani, Business Central MVP, is hosting yet another BC Open discussion. Saturday, the 25th, it is at 9:30 p.m. India time, which is 9 a.m. Pacific Saturday my time and noon Eastern US time. And I highly recommend dropping in. It is a literal master class, as I would call it, in some kind of random Business Central topic. And sometimes there are predefined topics that he has based on questions that people have submitted. So he solicits questions in advance. Other times it's just an open Q&A. And on the fly, he starts writing AL code, or he digs into Business Central and does tests. And it's amazing to watch it unfold. So I always enjoy it. It's a great discussion, great people on the call, and Saurav does a great job organizing it. So if you're around on Saturday and grab some coffee in the morning, or grab a lunch during the day, or grab some tea in the evening if you're in those time zones, and check it out. Highly recommend it. Check him out on Twitter. I was trying to add his Twitter handle and forgot. At Saurav Dhyani on Twitter, and look for the BC Open discussion hashtag. So highly recommend it. Always a great time. And with that, this concludes a Friday flaneuring. I think it's a gerund, right? I saw there was flânerie as the noun. I don't know how to pronounce that. I don't know French, but with that, I hope that was interesting, fun, enjoyable, informative, and have a good Friday, and have a good weekend. Okay, talk to you later.
Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above.